You want to know why most people don't succeed? Because they let fear park in their minds like it pays rent. Fear is not your owner. It's a squatter. And you're the landlord. Evicted. I was homeless, slept under bridges, dropped out of school, but fear didn't stop me. Why? Because I wanted success as bad as I wanted to breathe. Fear is just a test. It's the universe asking, how bad do you want it? You think LeBron fears the free throw line? No, he practices until his hands bleed. You think Oprah feared rejection? She got fired and said, watch me rebuild. Fear is fuel, use it. Here's the truth. Fear won't disappear. But courage is acting despite fear. Every dream you have is on the other side of that wall of fear. Break it down. Do you remember why you started? Remember why you started. Your family, your legacy, your purpose, they're counting on you. So today I challenge you. Name your fear, write it down. Then ask yourself, what's the worst that could happen? Usually the answer is embarrassment or failure. But failure isn't fatal, it's fertilizer. It grows your next victory. Stop waiting for fear to leave. Start before you're ready, because greatness isn't about comfort, it's about conquering. Now go, overcome. Fear has a way of distorting reality, making obstacles appear insurmountable and convincing you that failure is inevitable. But here's the truth. Fear is not a prophet, it's a manipulator. It amplifies risks while silencing your potential, whispering doubts that paralyze progress. Eric Thomas didn't rise from homelessness to become a globally recognized motivational speaker by listening to fear. He understood early on that fear doesn't speak facts. It fabricates fiction. Think about the last time fear held you back. Maybe it was the fear of rejection before asking for a promotion, the fear of embarrassment before starting a business, or the fear of failure before pursuing a dream. In that moment, fear didn't just present risks, it exaggerated them. It convinced you that stumbling in front of others would define you forever. That one no meant you'd never succeed, or that mistakes were proof of inadequacy. But none of that is true. Fear thrives on worst-case scenarios, painting them as the only possible outcomes, when in reality, they're just possibilities, not prophecies. Eric Thomas often said, you have to want success as bad as you want to breathe. That level of desire doesn't leave room for fear's lies. When you're fighting for air, you don't stop because someone tells you it's impossible. You don't quit because the odds seem stacked against you. You keep going because your survival depends on it. Fear, on the other hand, tells you to stop breathing, to accept suffocation rather than push through the struggle. But just like a drowning person fights to reach the surface, you must fight to silence fear's deception. One of fear's greatest lies is that failure is final. It convinces you that if you fall, you'll never get back up. But history is filled with stories of people who failed repeatedly before achieving greatness. Thomas Edison didn't invent the light bulb on his first try. He failed 1,000 times. Michael Jordan was cut from his high school basketball team. Oprah Winfrey was fired from her first television job. If they had believed fear's lie, they would have quit before their breakthroughs. But they understood that failure isn't the opposite of success. It's part of the process. Fear also lies by making you believe you're alone in your struggles. It isolates you, convincing you that everyone else hasn't figured out why you're the only one stumbling. But the reality is, every person who has ever achieved something meaningful has faced fear. The difference between those who succeed and those who don't isn't the absence of fear. It's the refusal to let fear dictate their action. Eric Thomas didn't become a powerhouse speaker overnight. He battled self-doubt, financial hardship, and societal expectations. But he kept speaking, kept pushing, because he knew fear was just noise, not truth. Another way fear deceives you is by making you overestimate the cost of failure and underestimate the cost of inaction. It convinces you that trying and failing will be worse than never trying at all. But what's the real cost of letting fear win? Regret. Wondering what could have been if you had just taken that chance. Eric Thomas could have stayed in Detroit, accepted his circumstances, and believed the lie that he wasn't meant for more. But he chose to confront his fear, and now his voice inspires millions. Fear also tricks you into believing that timing has to be perfect. Wait until you're more prepared, it says. Wait until conditions are ideal. But perfect timing is another illusion. There will always be reasons to delay. Another skill to learn, another dollar to save. Another sign to confirm you're ready. But success doesn't wait for perfect conditions. Eric Thomas didn't wait until he had a degree to start speaking. He didn't wait until he had a platform to share his message. He started where he was, with what he had, and grew from there. The most dangerous lie fear tells is that you're not enough, not smart enough, not strong enough, not worthy enough. But that's never true. You are capable of more than fear allows you to believe. Eric Thomas was a high school dropout who became a PhD. He was homeless before he was a headline speaker. If he had believed fear's lies about his limitations, he would have stayed stuck. But he rejected those lies and rewrote his story. So, how do you combat fear's deception? First, recognize it. When fear speaks, question it. Ask yourself, is this really true? Or is fear exaggerated? Second, replace fear's lies with facts. If fear says, you'll fail, remind yourself of past challenges you've overcome. If fear says you're not ready, remind yourself that growth happens in action, not waiting. Third, take small steps forward. Fear loses power when you move despite it. Eric Thomas's life is proof that fear is a liar. It told him he wouldn't make it, but he did. It told him his past defined him, but he redefined himself. Fear will always whisper, but you don't have to listen. You are stronger than your doubts, more capable than fears, and destined for more than fear would ever admit. So the next time fear tries to sell you a lie, remember, the truth is you've already got everything it takes to win. Discomfort is not your enemy. It's your teacher. Every time you push beyond what feels easy, every time you step into uncertainty, you are not just moving towards success, you are rewiring yourself for it. Eric Thomas didn't become one of the world's most sought-after motivational speakers by staying in his comfort zone. He became who he is by repeatedly doing what terrified him, by leaning into the very things that made him feel exposed, unprepared, and vulnerable. That's the paradox of growth. The things that feel the most uncomfortable in the moment are the very experiences that build the strength, resilience, and confidence you need to reach the next level. Think about the last time you avoided something because it felt uncomfortable. Maybe it was a difficult conversation you kept postponing, a new skill you were afraid to learn, or a challenge that seemed too daunting to start. In that moment, your brain was likely sending you signals to retreat, to stay where it's safe, to avoid the risk of failure or embarrassment. But here's the truth. Comfort is where dreams go to die. Nothing extraordinary was ever achieved inside a comfort zone. Every major breakthrough in history, whether in business, sports, science, or personal development, required someone to step into the unknown, to embrace the discomfort of uncertainty, and to push through resistance. Eric Thomas often said, you have to destroy the old you to build the new. That destruction isn't easy. It means letting go of familiar habits, challenging long-held beliefs, and facing the temporary pain of growth. It means waking up early when you'd rather sleep, speaking up when you'd rather stay silent, and showing up when you'd rather quit. Discomfort is the price of transformation. When Thomas was homeless, he could have accepted his circumstances as his fate. Instead, he chose the discomfort of relentless effort. Studying in stairwells, practicing speeches for hours, and refusing to let his past dictate his future. He understood that growth doesn't happen in the safety of what's familiar. It happens in the struggle of what's possible. One of the biggest misconceptions about success is that it should feel natural, effortless, or comfortable. But the opposite is true. The most successful people in the world aren't immune to discomfort. They've simply learned to move through it. Athletes train until their muscles scream. Entrepreneurs work through sleepless nights. Artists revise their work endlessly. None of that feels good in the moment, but it's the only way to mastery. Discomfort is the gateway to skill, and skill is the foundation of confidence. The more you willingly step into discomfort, the more you expand your capacity for greatness. Discomfort also reveals who you truly are. When things are easy, anyone can show up. But when things get hard, when doubt creeps in, when fatigue sets in, that's when you discover what you're made of. Eric Thomas didn't build his reputation on sunny days. He built it in the storms. He faced rejection, financial hardship, and moments of despair. But he kept going because he knew that discomfort wasn't a sign to stop. It was a sign that he was growing. The same is true for you. Every time you push through discomfort, you're not just achieving a goal, You're proving to yourself that you're stronger than your fears. Another reason discomfort is so powerful is that it rewires your brain. Your brain. Neurologically, every time you do something challenging, you strengthen new neural pathways. What feels difficult today will feel easier tomorrow, but only if you keep pushing. This is why consistency matters more than intensity. It's not about one heroic effort. It's about daily, disciplined steps into discomfort. Eric Thomas didn't become a master speaker overnight. He practiced relentlessly, refining his voice, his message, and his delivery. What felt awkward at first eventually became second nature, but only because he refused to stay where it was comfortable. Discomfort also builds resilience. Life doesn't get easier, you get stronger. The more you expose yourself to controlled challenges, whether it's public speaking, learning a new skill, or taking on bigger responsibilities, the more equipped you become to handle life's inevitable setbacks. Resilience isn't something you're born with. It's something you develop through repeated exposure to difficulty. Every time you choose discomfort over complacency, you're not just moving toward a goal. You're preparing yourself for the next level of your journey. It's important to recognize that discomfort isn't the same as suffering. Discomfort is temporary and purposeful. Suffering is prolonged and unproductive. The key is to lean into the right kind of discomfort, the kind that stretches you without breaking you. For Eric Thomas, that meant studying for hours despite exhaustion, not because he enjoyed the fatigue, but because he knew it was necessary for his future. It's the same reason an athlete embraces grueling workouts or a musician practices scales for hours. The discomfort has a purpose. So how do you start embracing discomfort? First, reframe it. Instead of seeing discomfort as something to avoid, see it as proof that you're growing. Second, start small. If public speaking terrifies you, start by speaking up in meetings. If you're afraid of failure, take on a low-stakes challenge. Third, focus on progress, not perfection. Every step forward, no matter how small, is a victory. Finally, remind yourself of the cost of staying comfortable. Regret is far more painful than temporary discomfort. Eric Thomas's life is a testament to the power of embracing discomfort. From homelessness to Harvard, from obscurity to influence, his journey was never easy, but it was always worth it. The same is true for you. Your dreams are on the other side of discomfort. The question isn't whether it will be hard. The question is whether you're willing to do what it takes. Because one thing is certain, you'll never become the best version of yourself by staying where it's comfortable. Growth demands discomfort. Success requires it. And you're capable of so much more than you think. The only limit is how much discomfort you're willing to embrace. Focus on your why, the unshakable foundation of perseverance. There comes a moment in every difficult journey when the pain feels overwhelming, when doubt screams louder than determination, and when quitting seems like the only logical option. In those moments, the only thing that keeps you going is your why, the deeper purpose that fuels your persistence when motivation fades. Eric Thomas didn't survive homelessness, academic struggles, and countless rejections because he never felt like giving up. He persevered because his why was bigger than his obstacles. His family, his legacy, and his calling to inspire others became the anchor that held him steady through every storm. Your why isn't just a nice idea. It's your lifeline when everything in you wants to quit. Understanding your why requires brutal honesty with yourself. It's not about surface level goals like money or fame. Those fade when the struggle gets real. Your true why taps into something eternal. The people you love, the impact you want to make, or the version of yourself you refuse to betray. When Eric Thomas slept on the streets of Detroit, what kept him studying in stairwells wasn't the vague hope of future success. It was the burning desire to prove his doubters wrong and create a better life for his family. That kind of why doesn't just motivate, it transforms pain into purpose. The power of a strong why manifests most clearly in moments of crisis. Consider the single mother working 2 jobs while going to school, the athlete rehabbing a career-threatening injury, or the entrepreneur facing bankruptcy. What separates those who push through from those who quit isn't talent or luck. It's the depth of their why. When your reason is strong enough, you'll endure what others won't, sacrifice what others can't, and persist when others would. This explains why 2 people can face identical challenges with completely different outcomes. Their whys aren't equal. One sees their struggle as temporary payment for a greater future. The other sees it as proof they should quit. Your why also serves as a compass when distractions and shortcuts tempt. In today's world of instant gratification, it's easy to chase shiny objects that promise quick results. But anyone who's achieved lasting success will tell you there are no shortcuts to anything worth having. Eric Thomas could have settled for minor victories, but his why demanded more. He didn't just want to escape poverty. He wanted to redefine what was possible for people like him. That kind of vision doesn't tolerate half efforts or temporary solutions. When you're connected to a powerful why, you develop what psychologists call goal shielding, the ability to filter out distractions and stay laser focused on what truly matters. Interestingly, your why often reveals itself in moments of anger or frustration. For many high achievers, their defining motivation came from being told they couldn't do something, from witnessing injustice, or from experiencing lack. Eric Thomas's why was partially forged when a professor told him he wasn't college material. That moment didn't break him. It lit a fire that still burns today. Your deepest motivations may similarly come from what pains you most. Maybe it's the memory of your parents struggling financially, the frustration of seeing your community limited by low expectations, or the personal failures that haunt you. These aren't wounds to hide, they're fuel to harness. The relationship between your why and your work ethic is direct and undeniable. When your purpose is weak, your effort fluctuates with your feelings. But when your why runs deep, you'll work even when you don't feel like it because your commitment transcends temporary emotion. This explains why Eric Thomas could study for hours while homeless, why he could practice speeches until his voice gave out, and why he kept knocking on doors that kept closing. His why created what psychologists call intrinsic motivation, the drive that comes from within rather than from external rewards. This is the most sustainable form of motivation because it doesn't depend on circumstances being perfect or constant validation from others. A powerful why also changes how you perceive time and sacrifice. Most people overestimate what they can achieve in a year, but underestimate what they can accomplish in a decade. When you're connected to a deep purpose, you stop looking for overnight success and start playing the long game. Eric Thomas didn't become an overnight sensation. He spent years honing his craft in obscurity. But because his why was clear, those years of preparation weren't burdens, they were investments. This long-term perspective is what separates true achievers from those who flame out quickly. When your why is strong enough, you don't mind being misunderstood in the short term because you're focused on a long-term vision others can't yet see. Your why also determines your threshold for pain and rejection. Every significant journey involves moments that test your limits. Times when the results don't match the effort, when critics outnumber supporters, when progress seems impossible. In these moments, your why becomes the lens through which you interpret setbacks. Without a strong purpose, failures feel like dead ends. With a powerful why, they become detours on the road to something greater. Eric Thomas faced countless rejections early in his speaking career, but because his purpose wasn't tied to immediate acceptance, he could persist until his message found its audience. Discovering your why isn't always straightforward. It requires introspection and sometimes painful honesty. Ask yourself, what makes me angry enough to take action? What legacy do I want to leave? Who am I trying to prove wrong or make proud? Your answers to these questions will point you toward your core motivation. For some, it's providing for family in ways they never experienced. For others, it's breaking generational cycles or proving that someone with their background can achieve what others say is impossible. Whatever your why, it should be emotional, personal, and powerful enough to get you out of bed on days when nothing else will. The most successful people don't just know their why. They protect it. They avoid environments and relationships that dilute their focus. They create daily rituals that reinforce their purpose. They consume content that strengthens rather than weakens their resolve. Eric Thomas surrounded himself with mentors and peers who understood his vision rather than those who would question it. This protective mindset is crucial because the world constantly bombards us with reasons to settle, to conform, to take the easier path. Your why needs safeguarding like a flame in the wind. Ultimately, your why is your competitive advantage. In a world where most people quit at the first sign of resistance, your commitment to a deeper purpose gives you staying power. It's what makes you work harder, last longer, and push further than others. Eric Thomas's journey proves that when your why is bigger than you, you become capable of things that defy logic and exceed expectations. Homelessness didn't stop him. Academic struggles didn't stop him. Rejection didn't stop him. Because his why created a must where others only saw maybe. So when the obstacles seem insurmountable, when the critics grow loud, and when quitting feels reasonable, come back to your why. Let it remind you why you started. Let it silence the doubts. Let it fuel your next step forward. Because history belongs to those who wanted more, not just for themselves, but for the people and purposes they're fighting for. Your why isn't just part of your success. It's the foundation that makes success inevitable. The people around you determine your altitude more than your talent, education, or even your work ethic. This isn't motivational fluff. It's psychological fact. Human beings are wired for social influence. We unconsciously adopt the attitudes, habits, and expectations of those we spend the most time with. Eric Thomas didn't rise from homelessness to international prominence by clinging to people who saw life through the lens of limitations. He intentionally surrounded himself with warriors, mentors who pushed him, peers who challenged him, and eventually a team that reflected the excellence he demanded of himself. Your environment isn't just where you are, it's who you become. Warriors come in many forms. Some are mentors who walk the path before you, their wisdom acting as guardrails against your inexperience. Others are peers running the same race as you, their progress pushing you to run faster. Some warriors might even be authors or historical figures you've never met, whose words and legacies become lifelines when you need perspective. What unites them is this: they refuse to let you settle for less than your potential. When Eric Thomas met his mentor at Michigan State University, he didn't find someone who coddled him. He found someone who confronted his excuses and forced him to level up. That's the warrior difference. The danger of surrounding yourself with average thinkers isn't that they'll attack your dream. It's that they'll slowly suffocate them with subtle skepticism. Most people don't outright tell you you can't. They say be realistic, or maybe you should have a backup plan. These well-meaning comments act like psychological termites, eating away at your confidence over time. Warriors do the opposite. They call forth the best version of you, even when you can't see it yourself. When Thomas was homeless, the people who truly helped him weren't those who just gave him spare change, but those who gave him challenging questions. What's your plan? How will you change this? Who do you intend to become? Financial guru Jim Rohn famously said you become the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. Neuroscience backs this up. Through mirror neurons, our brains literally mimic the behaviors we observe. Spend time with people who hit snooze 3 times and soon you'll justify sleeping in. Surround yourself with disciplined early risers and your own morning routine transform. Eric Thomas's inner circle didn't bond over complaints or excuses. They bonded over goals, strategies, and relentless improvement. This creates what psychologists call positive peer pressure, an environment where growth isn't optional but expected. Warriors also serve as reality checks when your self-perception gets distorted. In moments of success, they keep you humble. In seasons of failure, they remind you of your capabilities. When Thomas began gaining recognition, his real warriors didn't let him get arrogant. They pushed him to prepare harder, knowing bigger platforms require greater responsibility. Conversely, when he faced setbacks, these same people refused to let him wallow in self-pity. This balance is crucial because success isn't just about overcoming obstacles. It's about handling both triumph and adversity without losing your way. Building a warrior circle requires intentionality. You won't stumble into these relationships by accident. First, audit your current influences. Who drains your energy versus who energizes you? Who makes excuses versus who finds solutions? Second, seek out mentors. Don't wait for perfect introduction. Attend events, send thoughtful emails, offer value first. Third, upgrade your peer group gradually. You don't need to abandon old friends, but you may need to spend more time in new environments where growth is the norm. Fourth, study warrior mindsets through books, podcasts, or biographies. These can serve as virtual mentors when physical ones aren't available. The warrior principle extends beyond people to include what you consume mentally. The content you ingest, social media feeds, news sources, entertainment, access constant programming. Eric Thomas didn't fill his mind with trivial distractions during his climb. He immersed himself in material that reinforced his growth. This isn't about being rigid. It's about recognizing that your mind is sacred space. Every hour spent on mindless scrolling is an hour not spent learning, creating, or connecting with people who elevate you. One of the most powerful aspects of warrior relationships is accountability. Real warriors don't just cheer you on, they call you out. They notice when you're playing small, when you're making excuses, or when you're letting fear dictate your decisions. Thomas's mentors didn't praise effort alone. They demanded results. This kind of accountability stings in the moment, but becomes priceless in retrospect. The right people will hold you to standards you're initially uncomfortable with, which is exactly how growth happens. There's also an economic dimension to warrior relationships, what social scientists call social capital. Your network determines your net worth not just financially, but in opportunities, ideas, and introductions. Eric Thomas's association with Michigan State University opened doors that may have remained closed otherwise. This isn't about using people. It's about recognizing that success is collaborative. The myth of the lone genius is just that, a myth. Every breakthrough involves a constellation of contributors, advisors, and supporters. The warrior mindset also includes knowing when to walk away from toxic relationships, even with family or longtime friends. This isn't about arrogance, but about self-preservation. Some relationships act like anchors, not because the people are bad, but because their worldview is fundamentally incompatible with your growth. Thomas had to distance himself from certain influences during his transformation, not out of hatred, but necessity. This is often the hardest part of personal growth, outgrowing people you care about without abandoning your own potential. Surrounding yourself with warriors creates a compound effect over time. Early on, the difference seems negligible. You're still facing similar struggles as everyone else. But gradually, the accumulated wisdom, habits, and standards reshape your trajectory. What once felt impossible becomes normal. Where others see obstacles, you see opportunities, because you've been conditioned by warriors to think differently. Eric Thomas's speaking skills didn't develop in a vacuum. They were honed in environments where excellence was modeled and mediocrity wasn't tolerated. The ultimate test of your warrior circle comes during life's inevitable storms. When failure hits, when health falters, when plans collapse. Average people will echo your doubts. Warriors will remind you of your strength. They won't sugarcoat reality, but they'll help you find a lesson in the struggle. Thomas's lowest moments, homelessness, academic struggles became turning point because the right people helped him reframe those experiences as preparation rather than punishment. Building your warrior tribe is an ongoing process. As you grow, your needs change. The mentors who guided your early steps may not have the wisdom for your current challenges. The peers who once pushed you may now be holding you back. This isn't betrayal, it's evolution. The key is ensuring you're always surrounded by people slightly ahead of you in some area. People who pull you forward rather than hold you in place. In the end, surrounding yourself with warriors isn't about elitism. It's about taking responsibility for your growth. You wouldn't train for the Olympics at a casual gym. Yet many people pursue extraordinary goals while immersed in ordinary environments. Eric Thomas's story proves that transformation happens fastest when you're surrounded by those who demand your best. Your current circle is either accelerating or inhibiting your potential. There's no neutral. Choose wisely, because the people around you don't just influence your journey. They ultimately help determine whether you reach your destination at all. The question isn't whether you need warriors around you. You absolutely do. The real question is, are you willing to make the tough choices required to find them, to earn their respect, and to contribute value to their lives in return? Because warriors don't surround themselves with bystanders. They invest in other warriors. Your tribe is waiting. But first, you must decide to become the kind of person they want in theirs. Fear doesn't surrender to philosophical debates or positive affirmation. It dissolves in the furnace of consistent action. This is a brutal truth that separates dreamers from achievers. Movement creates courage, not the other way around. Eric Thomas didn't wait until he felt confident to start speaking. He spoke until confidence came. He didn't overcome his fear of failure before taking risks. He took risks until failure lost its power to stop him. There's a neurological secret at work here. Action rewires your brain's fear response faster than any other method. Every time you move forward despite fear, you're not just making progress. You're reprogramming your nervous system to associate challenge with capability rather than threat. Procrastination is fear's greatest ally because it creates the illusion of safety while secretly strengthening anxiety. The longer you avoid a difficult task, the more monstrous it grows in your imagination. That speech you need to give, the business idea you want to launch, the difficult conversation you've been avoiding. With each day of delay, your mind constructs increasingly catastrophic scenarios about what could go wrong. But here's what neuroscience reveals. Action interrupts this destructive cycle by providing concrete data to overwrite your irrational fears. When you actually start that project, have that conversations, or attempt that skill, you collect real-world evidence that you're more capable than what your anxiety suggested. Eric Thomas calls this executing consistently, not just intending. The daily discipline of letting action, not emotion, dictate your progress. The relationship between action and fear follows a counterintuitive pattern. Action must come first, confidence follows. Most people get this backward. They wait to feel ready before acting, not realizing readiness is born from action itself. Consider how toddlers learn to walk. They don't wait until they're confident. They won't fall. They stumble their way to competence through relentless trial. This same principle applies to every skill worth mastering. Public speaking becomes comfortable only after dozens of speeches. Writing flows only after years of forcing yourself to write poorly first. Business acumen develops through countless small failure, not from waiting until you have perfect knowledge. Eric Thomas's legendary speaking ability wasn't a natural gift. It was forged through thousands of hours of practice, often in empty rooms before he ever commanded stadiums. Action also defeats fear through the powerful mechanism of momentum. Physics teaches that a body in motion tends to stay in motion. This law applies equally to human psychology. The first rep in the gym is always the hardest. The first sentence of a book, the most daunting. The first cold call, the most terrifying. But with each subsequent action, resistance weakens, momentum builds. What began as a struggle becomes a rhythm. This explains why high achievers maintain rigid routines. They're not relying on willpower, but leveraging the compound effect of continuous motion. When Thomas was homeless, his daily commitment to studying in stairwells wasn't just about accumulating knowledge. It was about maintaining forward momentum, despite circumstances that could have justified surrender. Fear thrives in the abstract, but withers under the concrete. Take any overwhelming challenge and break it into specific, immediate actions, and something remarkable happens. The fear diminishes. Building a successful business feels paralyzing, but email 3 potential clients today feels manageable. Getting in shape seems impossible, but a walk 15 minutes right now feels doable. This is the granular power of action. It transforms vague anxieties into concrete steps. Eric Thomas's rise from homelessness didn't begin with a grand plan to become famous. It started with micro actions, showing up at a community college, asking for help, studying 1 chapter at a time. Each small victory built his confidence to attempt slightly larger actions, creating an upward spiral of capability. The workplace of fear is the gap between intention and execution. That dangerous space where I should lingers, but I hasn't begun. Research shows that the longer this gap remains open, the less likely action becomes. This is why high performers develop what psychologists call implementation intention. Specific plans that link triggers to actions. Instead of I'll exercise more, they decided when my alarm goes off at 6 a.m., I put on my running shoes and walk out the door. Eric Thomas embodies this principle through his legendary work ethic. His success isn't the result of sporadic bursts of effort, but of systems that convert intention into automatic action, writing daily, studying religiously, rehearsing relentlessly. Action also builds what psychologists term evidence-based confidence, the unshakable assurance that comes from having a track record of overcoming challenge. Unlike the fragile confidence of positive thinking alone, this variety withstands setbacks because it's rooted in lived experience. Every time you act despite fear, you're depositing proof of your capability into your psychological bank account. Over time, these deposits compound into unshakable self-trust. When Thomas faced audiences that might intimidate others, his confidence came not from arrogance, but from knowing he prepared more thoroughly than anyone else in the room. His mantra, "You have to want success as bad as you want to breathe," isn't just motivational, it's neurological. That level of commitment creates action patterns that literally rewire your brain's fear responses. The most successful people don't eliminate fear. They develop what Navy SEAL call comfort in the uncomfortable. This trained response comes not from avoiding stressful situations, but from repeatedly exposing yourself to controlled doses of challenge. Just as vaccines introduce weakened viruses to build immunity, deliberate action in the face of small fears builds resilience against larger ones. Eric Thomas's early speeches in small churches prepared him for later stadiums. Not because the settings were similar, but because the act of consistently facing performance anxiety at any level strengthened his capacity to handle greater pressure. Action also provides the only real antidote to perfectionism, that paralyzing fear of doing something imperfectly. Perfectionism isn't high standard, it's fear disguised as virtue. The solution isn't lowering your standard, but separating creation from refinement. Write the terrible first draft. Give the flawed first speech. Launch the imperfect first product. Thomas's early speeches weren't polished masterpieces. They were raw, emotional, and sometimes messy, but each one provided data to improve the next. In the creative process, done is better than perfect because finished work can be improved while imaginary perfection remains forever out of reach. Perhaps most importantly, action reshapes your identity. The stories you tell yourself about who you are and what you're capable of. Every time you act despite fear, you're voting for a new self-concept. I'm someone who faces challenges rather than avoids them. Over time, these accumulated votes override old self-doubts. Eric Thomas didn't become the hip-hop preacher overnight. He became that person through thousands of actions that reinforced his identity as a speaker, educator, and motivator. The psychological principle is clear. You don't act your way into new ways of thinking. You think your way into new ways of acting. The call to action isn't about reckless impulsivity, but strategic momentum. Start before you're ready, but start smart. Break monolithic goals into micro actions. Track progress meticulously. What gets measured gets managed. Create accountability systems that raise the cost of inaction. Most importantly, understand that action isn't a one-time event, but a lifestyle. A daily commitment to let emotion, not emotion, dictate your direction. Eric Thomas's life screams this truth. Action is the antidote to fear, the architect of confidence, and the bridge between who you are and who you must become. The world isn't divided into those who feel fear, and those who don't. It's divided into those who act despite fear and those who let fear veto their potential. Your future self will thank you for every action you take today that your fears told you to postpone. Start now, not because you're ready, but because you'll never be ready until you start.